Hi everyone. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. Today, we're going to embark on a terrifying short stories under 10 minutes. A journey through different cultures, exploring some of the scariest horror stories from around the world. But before we begin, I want to know, what is the scariest horror story you've ever heard? Share it in the comments, and let's discover together what lies ahead.
1. The Witch's Curse of Salem. Visiting Salem, Massachusetts, I was intrigued by the town's dark history. I stayed in an old inn that was once home to a woman accused of witchcraft. The locals believed her spirit still haunted the place. That night, I heard strange noises and felt a cold breeze. I dismissed it as my imagination and went to sleep. I woke up to the sound of whispering and saw a shadowy figure at the foot of my bed. The figure's eyes glowed with an eerie light, and it whispered, "You cannot escape the curse." Terrified, I tried to leave, but the door wouldn't budge. The figure moved closer, and I felt a sharp pain in my chest. I realized I was being cursed. In a desperate attempt to escape, I broke a window and fled into the night. As I looked back, I saw the figure watching me with hollow eyes. I later learned that the inn was built on the site of the woman's execution, and her spirit sought revenge on anyone who stayed there. 2. The Ghostly Bride of Prague. In Prague, I stayed at a historic hotel known for its ghostly bride. The story went that a bride had been left at the altar and took her own life in the hotel. Her spirit was said to haunt the place, seeking vengeance on those who reminded her of her lost love. That night, I heard the sound of sobbing and saw a shadowy figure in a wedding dress. The figure's eyes were filled with sorrow, and she whispered, "You remind me of him." Terrified, I tried to leave, but the door was locked. The figure moved closer, and I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I realized I was the next victim. In a desperate attempt to escape, I broke a window and fled into the night. As I looked back, I saw the figure watching me with hollow eyes. I later learned that the hotel had been haunted for centuries, and no one had ever survived an encounter with the ghostly bride. 3. The Desert Phantoms of Dubai. While exploring the deserts of Dubai, I came across an abandoned village. The locals spoke of phantoms that haunted the place, but I dismissed it as superstition. That night, I set up camp near the village. As the sun set, the air grew cold, and I heard strange noises. Shadows moved in the darkness, and I felt a presence behind me. I turned around, but no one was there. The whispers grew louder, and I saw ghostly figures emerging from the sand. Panic set in as I realized I was surrounded. The phantoms whispered of a curse placed on the village by a vengeful spirit. In a desperate attempt to escape, I ran towards the dunes. As I looked back, I saw the phantoms watching me with hollow eyes. I later learned that the village had been abandoned for centuries, and the phantoms sought vengeance on anyone who dared to enter. 4. The Possessed Theater of New York. In New York City, I visited an old theater rumored to be haunted. The locals spoke of a spirit that possessed anyone who entered the stage. That night, I decided to explore the theater. As I walked through the darkened corridors, I felt a sense of unease. The air was thick and heavy, and I heard whispers echoing through the halls. I found myself drawn to the stage, unable to resist. As I stepped onto the stage, the lights flickered, and I felt a cold breeze. A ghostly figure appeared, its eyes glowing with an eerie light. It whispered, "You belong to me now." Terrified, I tried to leave, but my feet were rooted to the spot. The figure moved closer, and I felt a sharp pain in my chest. I realized I was being possessed. In a desperate attempt to escape, I closed my eyes and wished for freedom. When I opened them, I was outside the theater, but I felt different. I looked down and saw my reflection in a puddle, my eyes glowing with the same eerie light. 5. The haunting of the old subway line. Living in New York City, the subway was a part of my daily life. One night, I was waiting for the train at an old, lesser-known station. The platform was eerily empty, and the air felt unusually cold. As I waited, I noticed a train approaching that wasn't on the schedule. It was an old, rusted train that looked like it belonged to another era. I boarded out of curiosity, finding it empty. The doors closed, and the train began to move, faster and faster, through dark, uncharted tunnels. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and I saw shadowy figures standing at the ends of the carriage. They began to move towards me, whispering in a language I couldn't understand. Panic set in as I tried to open the doors, but they were locked. The whispers grew louder, and the figures reached out to me. Just as they were about to touch me, the train screeched to a halt, and the doors opened. I stumbled out onto a platform that looked strangely familiar. To my horror, I realized I was back at the same station, but the world around me had aged decades. The train had brought me to a future where I had never existed. 6. The ghostly tenant of the Upper West Side. I moved into a charming brownstone on the Upper West Side, excited to start a new chapter of my life. The building was old, with a history that intrigued me. My neighbors were friendly, but they seemed reluctant to talk about the previous tenant. That night, I heard strange noises coming from the apartment above mine, which was supposed to be vacant. Footsteps echoed on the ceiling, and soft, indistinct murmurs filled the air. Curious, I went upstairs to investigate. The door to the apartment was slightly ajar. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The apartment was furnished, but it looked like no one had lived there for years. As I walked through the rooms, I felt a chill and saw shadows moving in the corners of my vision. Suddenly, a cold hand touched my shoulder. I turned around to see a ghostly figure of a woman, her eyes filled with sorrow. She whispered, "You took my place." Terrified, I fled back to my apartment. The next morning, I found an old newspaper clipping under my door. It was an obituary for the woman, dated the same day I moved in. I later learned that she had died tragically and her spirit remained, searching for the life she lost. 7. The Cursed Relic of the Metropolitan Museum. As an art enthusiast, I frequently visited the Metropolitan Museum of Art. One evening, during a special after-hours event, I wandered into an exhibit of ancient artifacts. Among the items was a peculiar-looking amulet, intricately carved with symbols I didn't recognize. As I stared at it, I felt an overwhelming urge to touch it. Ignoring the warning signs, I reached out and grasped the amulet. A sudden, intense cold washed over me, and the room seemed to spin. The museum lights flickered, and I heard whispers echoing around me. I looked up to see the other visitors frozen in place, their eyes wide with fear. The whispers grew louder, and I saw ghostly figures surrounding me. They pointed at the amulet and chanted in an ancient tongue. The amulet burned in my hand, and I felt a searing pain in my chest. Desperate, I threw the amulet back into the display case. The lights steadied, and the whispers ceased. The other visitors resumed their activities, seemingly unaware of what had just happened. I left the museum in a daze, but as I looked back, I saw my reflection in the glass door. My eyes glowed with an eerie light, and I knew the curse had marked me forever.
Thank you for watching, especially to the subscribers for supporting our stories. What story do you like the most? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more thrilling tales. See you in the next video.